I want to make a very clear distinction between sustainable remediation, which is currently a hot topic across the world, really, both here in the UK, in Europe, North America, where the idea originally was conceived, and Australia as well, and regeneration. And really the context is about planning and reuse of formerly developed land. So this lecture is focusing on regeneration, but if part 2A is your interest, then what you need to focus on is the removal of unacceptable risk, and there are some flyers on your seats about a workshop we're running to look at what unacceptable intake might look like. I'm putting part 2A to one side, and I want to focus on the process of creating new, thriving, successful, lasting communities, of which regeneration is the summary and remediation is sometimes a step on the way. This is one of my favourite quotes, and it sort of harks back to the nothing is new. This is a quote from the book of Ezekiel. Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture that you must tread down with your feet the rest of your pasture, and to drink of clear water that you must muddy the rest of the water with your feet? We haven't done very well in heeding the warnings of this prophet of 2.5 millennia ago. We had a visiting speaker from Google at the time when Google and China were in the news. And I asked at the end, so has Google abandoned the do no evil principle? Doing no evil is no longer enough. And if you're going to be sustainable in the sense of lasting, having a longevity, then you have to do more good than evil. Neutrality is not sufficient. So I thought I'd look at some definitions. I'm not sure who Brown is. Apparently he's looking for a job at the moment and eating fewer Kit Kats and more bananas. But he defined it as the process of turning around deprived communities in decayed neighbourhoods. It's about people. Let's see if the technology is sustainable. There we go. What's a brownfield? Only the Labour Party manifesto mentions the word brownfield. Conservatives, if you're into it, mention garden grabbing, and the Lib Dems simply refer to giving third parties a right of appeal in planning decisions. Cabinet, the network on brownfield regeneration that both you and Hall and I were members of, define brownfields as sites that have been affected by their former users. They're derelict, they're underused. They don't have to have contamination, but that often is a feature of them. Crucially, they require some kind of intervention to bring them back into beneficial use. So what does sustainable brownfield regeneration look like? It's the process of bringing back into a beneficial use, not just a use, but a beneficial use, one that meets needs, not wants, of society, in a way that ensures the satisfaction of those needs in an environmentally sensitive, economically viable, socially acceptable, and institutionally robust way. And you can see echoes of the Brundtland definition of sustainable development, which is what we've taken and modified and adapted to sustainable regeneration. So that's the background. So what does effective regeneration look like? The focus has to be on people. The focus has to be on providing hope, jobs, opportunities, a quality of life. And therefore that is, and I'm stealing this phrase from Groundwork, our chairman's organisation, it's about creating places for people. It's about therefore having a shared vision so that there is a communal ownership of the spaces that we are creating. And therefore it is not about the individual, but about sharing and agreeing on what we want to do with the land. Those of you who are into American movies will recognise the phrase "build and they will come." It refers to a baseball field in a cornfield, and if you were able to fly into Dublin Airport, you might see the hoardings about the new O2 arena in Dublin, where the logo, or the motto, if you like, is "It's built and they're coming." Well, they are now, because the flights have been restarted. So this idea of regeneration, bringing life back, bringing economic activity back into an area is very well proven. And you'll have a chance later on to hear about the Olympics, and we know about what's happening in East London and so on. It's been said that waste is a resource in the wrong place. The opposite is also true. Resources are a waste in the wrong place. And it's about recognizing what we have, where we have, and what we can do with it to optimize the use of what could be resources and minimize wastefulness. That requires a strong sense of leadership, a strong sense of garnering vision, engendering vision, getting the resources together and getting things done. And if you want to look at the Cabernet website, you'll see some of the work that Ewan, for example, was instrumental in leading in defining what a successful brownfield regeneration process manager needs to be like and needs to be able to do. Bringing it back down a bit to contaminated land specifically, what does sustainable contaminated land management look like? Well, I would argue it has to be risk-based. It cannot afford to be multifunctional. It cannot afford to go down the new Austrian or old Dutch approach. It has to ensure that the land is fit for its purpose, either current or future. And that any remediation will achieve that fitness of purpose in a balanced social, environmental and economic way. And we'll come back to look at what that might look like. It therefore means identifying and applying the right level of knowledge in order to only consume those resources that need to be consumed. The times they are a-changing, and in particular the ability to throw resources at a problem to cover over the remediation consultants' inadequacies will come to an end. There is increased transparency, there is increased accountability, so you cannot hide behind the let's throw some extra widgets or dump trucks at it. Some of you may have seen the documentary The Requiem for Detroit. When I went to Detroit last year to take part in the US EPA Brownfields Conference, I'd been told that Detroit is the brownfield city, but I couldn't really understand what that meant. Imagine Birmingham devoid of cars and people. Imagine walking the streets of Birmingham on a Sunday and finding no one and hearing nothing. Skyscrapers, broad boulevards, big buildings, big spaces to yourself. That's what a brownfield city looks like. Detroit has surrendered back 40 square miles to arable land. It's lost hundreds of thousands of people. It was the fourth largest city in America. It is no more. I looked and there were no people. Every bird in the sky had flown away. I looked and the fruitful land was a desert. All its towns lay in ruins. It may be that Toyota has single-handedly come back to the rescue of the American car manufacturing industry, and maybe their new logo will be the car behind you is a Toyota. You can think about that one. So I've used the word smart in my title. This is not a word that I've come up with. If you want to look at the American concept of smart growth, it's about mixed land use. Go and read the party manifestos and see the lack of vision, the lack of imagination, the commitment to monolithic housing developments. Search for the words housing estate in those manifestos and you will see that the problems of creating tomorrow's sink estates are embedded in the parliamentary visions of our current party leaders. It's about compact building designs. It's about creating a variety of housing opportunities and choices, not the standard wimpy boxes, and I speak as an ex-employee of Wimpy. It's about creating places where people can walk about, which both reduces energy consumption, increases exercise, and crucially, if you look at Richard Florida's thinking, creates opportunities to literally bump into each other. The water cooler conversation as you walk to and from work. It's about creating distinct identities, about making places where people want to be associated with, want to belong to. And it's about strengthening the investment towards where people are now, towards existing communities, be they advantaged or deprived, be they be young or established. And it's about providing choice in transportation. Some of you will have walked here, some of you will have come by car, by train. Who knows? Somebody may even have been able to fly into Birmingham this morning. So it's about a range of dimensions that is just so much broader than just remediation per se. So sustainable brownfield regeneration, the entire process of bringing life back to places, needs what I'm calling smart, risk-based contaminated land management. Smart in this case means successful in terms of rendering the land fit for use. Being able to prove it. As Kathy Ryan in the Tom Clancy book says, if you don't write it down, it did not happen. Show me the evidence. You can tell I've spent too many transatlantic flights watching movies on the back of an aeroplane. It's about realizing that traditionally in this country we've sweated the small stuff. We've remediated at levels of exposure and at levels of risk that, quite frankly, we should have been able to put to bed very early on and not wasted time and money and resources on it. It's about realizing there are a variety of perspectives, there are a variety of interests in the land and in what's going to happen to the land beyond our own personal one. And it's about tempo and temporariness and temporality, because the next land use will not be the eternal one. Every life cycle of a land use comes to an end, and then something else will happen. So are we compromising flexibility, or are we allowing for the use after next? There is an argument for risk-based contaminated land management that still needs to be won. If you look at some of the thinking coming out, particularly from Austria, about when do you decide to remediate, and the underlying logic is you can leave high risks behind. That is sowing the seeds of problems for the future. So I believe the argument for a risk-based approach to land management is one about smartness, as I've defined it. It's about fitting into sustainable regeneration, but not of its own, necessarily meeting the definitions of sustainable in a redevelopment context. It requires us all to recognize that knowledge advances all the time, and therefore we have to be engaged in an ongoing process of learning. And I believe that it's a prerequisite to emerging from the current financial crisis that we are in, both in this country and globally. The jobs that have been lost, the manufacturing capacity that's gone, has created new brownfields, new abandoned, derelict, idle, underused land with the associated communities. So what are we going to do with it? Sustainable remediation, as I said, is a global interest. There is a white paper in the Remediation Journal. There is the SURF UK framework. There is an Australian network. There are conferences. There are panel discussions at the Battelle conference in Monterey, and so on and so forth. It's a hot topic. This is the way SURF UK defines sustainable remediation. I'm sure if you go to the Clare stand, 3 rows behind us, you can find a lot more about the work of the Sustainable Remediation Forum UK. The best solution is remediation that eliminates and/or controls unacceptable risks in a safe and timely manner, and which maximises the overall environmental, social and economic benefits of the remediation work. We call this sustainable remediation. Can't argue with that at all. So the best solution is remediation that deals with unacceptable risks. Not concentrations, but risks. How? In a safe manner. When? In a timely fashion, not leaving things for 3, 5, 10, 25 years, as one version of the Soil Framework Directive would have it. And how? In a way that looks at the benefits and the impacts in the environmental, social and economic realms and tries to maximise the net benefit. So let's have a look at a very simple example. Gasoline, a petrol spill, has given rise to a BEX plume in groundwater in a very simple sounding gravel aquifer, shallow groundwater. I might use this in the States, so please excuse the imperial units, they haven't quite caught up yet with the Système International. And we've already got the free product back. Quite simple stuff. So we go through a CLR 11 type options appraisal, and we end up with a combination of, say, air sparging and SVE, M&A, or biosparging. All of them will do the job. All of them have a track record. Which one do you choose? I realise some of you may be Liverpool fans or Fulham fans and may be interested in tonight's football scores. So what we're going to do is we play football. We play M&A against SVE and air sparging. And then we play bias sparging against SVE and air sparging. And we see who wins in each of the 4 dimensions of social acceptability, cost effectiveness, environmental impact, and the ease with which you can verify that the remediation has achieved your project objectives. The way you do that is you can do it with as many stakeholders as you want. You can test their internal consistency. It's a bit like playing paper, stones, and scissors. So you can see whether somebody is internally consistent, and you can see how much agreement there is amongst stakeholders as well. And that's the way you do it. You say A is better than B, worse than B, however it might be. I've done this particular exercise with my master's students at the University of Nottingham. And in that particular instance, these are the relative medal rankings, if you will. So in terms of cost effectiveness, M&A wins. Social acceptability, M&A wins. Environmental impact, M&A wins. But in terms of the ease with which you can prove the job is being done, air sparging, SVE comes out as top. So overall, in this case, you would say that the winner, the most sustainable of the 3 choices, would be monitored natural attenuation. This introduces another dimension into the discussion of sustainability you might like to think about, which is one of, are we worrying about absolute sustainability or relative, given that we've got options, all of which could deliver technical solutions? And I would argue that we should go down the relative sustainability appraisal route, because it's pragmatic, quick, and will give us useful results, rather than chasing what effectively is a philosopher's stone of something that might pretend to be absolute sustainability. Maybe we can come back to that one. I wasn't here yesterday because I was at a Silk PTP meeting, a specialist in land condition management panel, if you like, and we were discussing the revised criteria for a Silk. And I was pointing out the word reclamation is not a catch-all phrase. It has specific tight meanings. With Regen WM, the local regeneration company in the West Midlands, we've done some exercises looking at rewords. So here are some rewords: remediation, breaking the pollutant linkage; reclamation, getting the land back into a fit use; reusing land or buildings; refurbishing existing buildings; redevelopment, the creation of new buildings; regeneration, the bringing of life back into an area; revitalisation; and reinvention, changing the way a place is thought of and perceived by the outside world. So remediation is not the only fruit, and in a regeneration game, it's not even the most important one. So smart regeneration is about bringing together the physical construction, the stuff that engineers do, and geologists and environmental scientists help them do, with the socio-economic environment where we actually live, the Starbucks and the bookshops and everything else. Remediation creates opportunities outside the remediation box. We're pumping water out of the ground, and we're bringing with it a heat exchange capability that we could exploit. We're excavating soil and creating a hole. The hole could be a resource. It could become a basement, or it could become the place where you can install ground source heat pump infrastructure, for example. We have previous uses on the land. Money and engineering effort has gone into constructing foundations which can be reused. Just have a look at the Rufus project that Arab were involved in. We have existing infrastructure in the form of drains, channels for cables and so on, and we have existing buildings. If you get stuck at Derby Station and you're going north, look out to the right-hand side window and look at what they've done to the roundhouse. Stunning structure, it catches the eye, and what was a derelict eyesore is now a magnet. You want to go there. So I've gone back to the SURF UK definition, and I've tried to embed remediation back into regeneration. The best site-specific solution, because I want to get away from people saying our technology is sustainable. Depends on whether you're actually doing something that needs to be done or not, I guess. The best site-specific solution is remediation that eliminates and/or controls unacceptable risks in an integrated, safe and timely manner, and which maximises the overall environmental, social and economic benefits of the regeneration work, And we call this smart regeneration. And I guess I owe the guys in Surf UK a few pints of beer or glasses of wine on that one. The essence of this is to keep it short and sweet and keep it simple. Otherwise, you get lost in a quagmire of computer models and spreadsheets and simulations, and quite soon you end up in Met Office model mode if you look at the newspaper headlines of today. So how can we bring about this new kind of smart thinking? Well, we can embed it into the way we look at land use permitting. We can look at it being built into the new statutory guidance in Part 2A for historic contaminated land. It could perhaps even be the UK's contribution into any future soil framework directive. There are a hierarchy of mechanisms. Sustainable development is enshrined in the constitutions of Wales, of Croatia, of Tasmania. So at the very highest definition of a state or of a nation, you can embed sustainable thinking. It can be in primary legislation, which it isn't at the moment in Part 2A. It can be in secondary or statutory guidance legislation, in codes of practice, in standards, and so on. Each of these has a different ease with which it can be brought about, but also a different degree of authority. So I'm going to leave you with a thank you. This is the University of Nottingham's Jubilee campus, built on a brownfield site, and that is, we're not allowed to call it a library anymore. It's an information resource facility. I think that means it's got lots of computers in it and a great coffee shop. But I'm going to close with an out-and-out advert. On your seats, you've got a flyer about a new distance learning version of the master's course I run, and on it there is a tiny URL of a recording of this lecture, should you wish to make somebody else suffer what I've just been going through. So with that thought, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.